Hey y'all, welcome back to the podcast. It's Sister Liz here. For those of you who maybe feel like your Lent is extra Lenty this year, this series with Father Pat Griffin is for you. Today's episode is about Psalm 88, which can rightly be called Hello Darkness, My Old Friend. Get ready because you're going to learn some really helpful things here. Also, do us a huge favor and give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It really helps others to know about the podcast and the good content over here. Enjoy the episode, guys.
Psalm 88 is one of the really unusual psalms in the Psalter and one of the unusual Psalms of Lament. Everybody agrees it's a Psalm of Lament, but it doesn't have the same character as a lot of the other Psalms of Lament, which is to say there is no affirmation of God at the end, in the sense that God's going to take care of me and I don't have anything to worry about. Psalm 88 is the psalm of someone who has really experienced serious illness and is drawing near to death and has really had a very difficult life. And as a result of that, he turns to the Lord. But at the end, the last line of the psalm is really incredible. My only friend is darkness. I mean, really. I mean, how could you write something that has less hope in it than that? My only friend is darkness. And I love that line, and I love the attitude of the psalmist because of his or her willingness to put it out before God. But even having said all of that, the psalmist repeatedly turns to the Lord in the psalm. Each of the divisions of the psalm carries that summons. All right, the psalm begins, Lord my God. This is Psalm 88. Lord my God, I call out by day. At night I cry aloud in your presence. Let my prayer come before you. So he begins by saying, I call to the Lord and let my prayer come before him. And listen, Lord, to the kind of stuff that's going on in my life. And then he goes through a bunch of things, which we don't have time to go through some of them. But he goes through the things, and then you pick up in verse 10b. All day I call on you, Lord. I stretch out my hands to you. And then he continues with other elements. And then in verse 14, but I cry out to you, Lord. In the morning, my prayer comes before you. So 3 different times, after having dealt with a lot of the problems that have been present in his life, 3 different times he goes back and he says, but I cry to you, Lord. I pray to you, Lord. I seek your intercession. So it's not, I've abandoned you. Get out of here. I don't care. It's always, I come back and I cry to you, Lord. If he had written another strophe, at the end of that strophe again would be, but I cry to you, Lord. And if he wrote 10 more, each one of them would end that way. He's always bringing himself or herself back to the Lord and crying out to the Lord, even though they don't see any real hope. All right, they experience all the things that an ill person might come to know. So you see, for example, in verse 4, my soul is filled with troubles. My life draws near to Sheol. I am reckoned with those who go down to the pit. I am weak without strength. My couch is among the dead, with the slain who lie in the grave. You remember them no longer. They are cut off from your care. You plunged me into the bottom of the pit, into the darkness of the abyss. You hear all the images there about the end of life. It begins with Sheol, and then down to the pit, and then among the dead, and then lie in the grave, and then the bottom of the pit, and then the darkness of the abyss. There's 6 different ways of talking about dying, all right? And very concrete ways of bringing that image forward. But even after going through all of that, he says, but I cry to you, Lord. He speaks about the way in which the sick person, the dying person experiences some separation from his friends. So you see in verse 9, because of you, my friends shun me. You make me loathsome to them. All right. And then in verse 19, because of you, companions shun me. All right. Twice he speaks about the experience of the sick person being shunned by friends and neighbors and that. I don't know what your experience is. I know people who are really, really good people, but really don't like to go to hospitals. They really don't. I know guys who are ministers who really would not be able to do hospital ministry easily. They do it, but it doesn't come to them. So some people go and they visit people in the hospital and they spend 5 minutes and they say, I know you're tired, so I'll let you go. So then they go. It's not the person in the bed who's tired. It's the person who came in who just can't deal with it anymore. Our friends, when they see how sick we are, and if we're really seriously sick, maybe they get frightened, whatever it is, but it pushes them away. And it's not that they're bad people, it's just that they can't deal with it. And the psalmist says that my friends shun me, all right? They try to set some space up between me and them. So that experience of the psalmist does show up there. The psalmist experiences it in lots of different ways. One of the things that he does is he kind of calls God out in a certain way. And we pick up in verse 11. He says, do you work wonders for the dead? The answer to that is no, because when you're dead in the Hebrew thinking. Do the shades arise and praise you? The answer to that is no, because when you're dead, you're dead. Is your love proclaimed in the grave? The answer to that is no, because when you're dead, you're dead. Your fidelity in the tomb? Your answer to that is no, because when you're dead, you're dead. Are your marvels declared in the darkness? The answer to that is no, because when you're dead, you're dead. Your righteous deeds in the land of oblivion? The answer to that is no, because when you're dead, you're dead. So he goes through all of these different things, talking about once you've died, are any of these things done on your behalf, O Lord? And he knows the answer is no, because there's no afterlife in the Jewish way of thinking. So if the Lord wants this kind of praise, this kind of attitude, this kind of dealing with things, he's got to bring the psalmist back to health. He's got to help the psalmist move on. So it's interesting and it's gutsy the way in which he puts these things before the Lord, but it's what's on his mind. And he just says, if God really wants all of these good things to happen in this world, he's got to ask those who are living to do it. And I'm one of the living, and I'm one of the good guys. All right. And I'd be certainly willing to carry out that particular dynamic. And so that's some of the things that we could point out in this psalm that emphasizes the sense of the psalmist who is sick and the psalmist who is dying and the way in which he calls upon the Lord and repeatedly calls upon the Lord, but he doesn't see any end to his suffering and he doesn't see any way around dying. It's just right there in front of him, but he still prays. And that's the wondrous thing about it.
Yeah,
And that's why if I was dealing with people who are ministering or going to minister in a hospital, can I speak about that?
Yeah.
That if I was going to train people who are going to minister in a hospital, I would deal with this psalm, but I wouldn't deal with it first, but I would deal with it because it gives us a sense of the difficulties of those who are sick. And that's a helpful sense.
Yeah, I had shared a little bit earlier that, quite a while ago, 2017, I got very, very sick with sepsis. And I was in the ICU for days and had went into shock. And it was bad. It was really, when you're sick like that, you don't know that you're really that sick. You're just trying to survive whatever's happening. But everyone around you knows this is bad. This is really bad. And they're trying to encourage you. And, but then at some point you leave the hospital and you're having to recuperate, and so I was recuperating. I was in Arkansas, and then I eventually moved to Utica, New York. This psalm kept coming up, and it was just that. I mean, in my own sickness, it was like, what's happening? And I think those questions about does the dead person praise you? Can those in Sheol sing out to you? No. So those are almost those places of, I can't really say I trust right now. Like, I can't sing your praise, but I know if you don't help me, I won't be able to. If you do help me, I will, which is what happens at the end of, we were saying that the Psalms of Lamentation, there is this proclamation at the end where the psalmist says, now that this has happened, you've answered me, or you've done what I've asked. I've given my complaint and I've petitioned, and how you can help me. now I'll sing your praises. And for me, this psalm is like a little incomplete. There's possibility that this will come. And if you save me, I will sing, because I won't be dead. The dead can't sing, but I can, and I will when you rescue me. But at this moment, it's so dark. My only friend is darkness, that I can't see. But I know that I want to. I want to sing your praises. I don't want to be sent into darkness. I want you to be my friend. And I know this doesn't really connect, but in Psalm 89, I remember reading this psalm and feeling like I'm so sick and I want to get back out and serve. I want to do all the things I need to do. Psalm 89, the first line is, I will sing of your mercy forever, Lord, proclaim your faithfulness through all the ages. And I thought, just tack that one on the bottom of 88 and it would make sense. But I thought, I'm not ready for that. That's it's not just that the Lord isn't ready or that I don't trust him. I'm not ready. I'm still trying to figure out how to get out of this darkness. When I finally was well enough and was able to kind of go back, I began to realize this is no longer my song. This is no longer my psalm as I began to get well. But I felt like I was lending my voice to those who I do serve, those who are still suffering, to recognize their pain as well and to cry out for them when they can't cry out for themselves. Their only friend is darkness. They're sleeping in an alley. They're refugees in a refugee camp. They're in the wars and they can't. When you're in the midst of your sickness, you often can't cry out in the way you want, even though you know that you want to. And so it was a really profound experience for me, this particular psalm, to say when you're in the throes of it, and there are so many people who are in the midst of their suffering and feel they are in just the depths and depths of darkness, that they're not well enough yet. And yet we are. And so I think it's that, when we were looking at Psalm 22, that sense that the generations to come will sing your praises, right? And so I can lend my now healthy voice, to do what I said. The dead don't cry to you, but I am alive, so I can cry out to you for them and help their voice in some prayerful way, to get your attention. So, anyways, I love that, because I just think that is a way we participate in the Psalms and recognize them as not just my own personal, but the songs of the people, and we can join one another's voice. So it was just a powerful experience for me. So I appreciate you covering that one, because it does seem dreary. It does seem really hard, but we are often in really hard places, and we're just not well enough to get to that last verse, but we can if we stick together. Yeah, so thank you for that.
You're welcome. There is a certain sense in which one might think of this as an unfinished psalm, and you suggested that earlier, that he went through all this and all the suffering, things like that. But that if the Lord acted in the life of this individual, the rest of the psalm would be God praising God and thanking God and how faithful God is. But this stops at the point of still being surrounded by hurt and suffering, and my only friend is darkness. It's ready for the next experience, but it does tell us the way in which a lot of people experience life, and maybe they never get by the my only friend is darkness without the intercession of people that are willing to help them out.
Yeah, I think that's part of the sense of lamentation. We're happy to join people in praise, right? The Psalms of praise, we all want to join in, and we want to clap, and we want to dance and sing, and we have no problem joining in the joy of one another. But are we willing and able to join into the despair of others? And isn't that really what Jesus was calling us to? To participate in his suffering, so that we can see how it brings us to salvation and brings us to healing in life. Yeah, it's all very, very powerful. And,
Yep.
as I said, coming into Lent, I really appreciate the images that you've given us today. Again, we start in the kind of artsy art gallery and end in this place of when we're in that room and stuck in it, maybe, still trying to interpret each of the paintings, each of the Psalms we see. Can we stick with it and not be afraid of what these images will evoke, but trusting that these are the songs of people who trusted in God's love and mercy. And we have the witness of that in Jesus Christ, even in his own suffering. And as we go through Lent, to let ourselves understand what being befriended by darkness means, and how do we find the light that the Psalm 13 asks for, give light to my eyes, so that I
Yep.
don't see death, that there is a connection to all of this. So thank you so much for helping us as we begin this Lenten journey. And we hope that we'll be able to have you back again.
I'd be happy to do so.
Yeah. So have a happy Lent, or one that
Elizabeth,
brings
thank
us
you,
to
and
the
thank you for all
light.
the good work that you do.
Thanks. All right. Thank you, Father.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Stay tuned next week for episode 3 with Father Patrick Griffin about the Psalms of Lament, and he'll be covering Psalm 51. See you next time.